welcome to another Hayley-Roxanna crafts video on crocheting. So far when I've demonstrated crochet, I have only done it in rows, such as this, where you crochet along your row, flip your work and come back along your row. But sometimes you might want to crochet in the round, such as if you are making granny squares like these, or even if you are doing like plushies or amigurumi figures, such as this. So in this video, I am going to show you the two methods I have come across for starting crochet in the round. So the first method that I'm going to show you for starting crocheting in the round is the foundation circle method, which is like I've used for doing these granny squares for starting them off. So for this method, you take our yarn and hook, and you want to start with a slip knot onto your hook, as we've done when we were just crocheting in rows. You may want to make this tail slightly longer. It will become clear why once I finish demonstrating. And then just like you did when you were doing rows, we're going to start with chains, and we're going to do 4 chains. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Can do it with more or less chains, but more often than not it is just 4 chains that we do for this. And then to make this into a circle, we are going to insert the hook into that first chain like so. We're going to bring our yarn over and pull it through that chain, and then we're going to pull that through the loop on our hook, and that gives us our circle. So now when we work our stitches for this first round, we are going to work them into this hole here between those chains. Okay, so I'm actually going to do treble stitches if you are using UK terms, or double stitches if you're using US terms. So I'm going to start with 3 chains just for my first treble, just like I did when I was working in rows. And then I will work my trebles into that circle instead of working them into stitches or into the actual chains like you did when crocheting in rows. And as you do these stitches, you don't have to do the trebles, doubles, you can do whatever stitches you want or whatever stitches the pattern requires. But you want to try and do these stitches over that tail of yarn. Okay, and I've got to do 16 of these, so I will speed the video up a bit so that you don't have to actually sit and watch every single stitch done, and then I will show you what we do at the end of the round. Okay, so I'm now on to the very last stitch, like so, and then we're just going to slip stitch into the third of those 3 chains we did at the beginning to count as our first treble. Just get my hook through. Stitch like so, pull that yarn through, and then because we're slip stitching, we pull through the loop on the hook like so to complete that round. So that is a very sort of circular round. You can do different combinations of stitches and chains to make it more of a square first round like there. Just depends on what you're trying to do. And then, as you can see, that has left us with this hole in the middle. Now you don't have to close this hole up. Sometimes the pattern you are doing will look fine with that hole there. But if you do want to close this hole up, this is where having that longer tail end and crocheting over it comes in handy. If we just flip this over, to close that hole, we're just going to pull on that tail end like so. Okay, and then to secure that, to make sure the hole doesn't come open again, you will want to just weave it in. So you'll need to thread that up just onto a needle, and then I always sort of weave in the way it's going to start with and give it another pull, and then you can go back with your weaving, just literally threading it under these stitches. And you might just want to come back over it again just to make sure it holds. But like I said, sometimes it doesn't matter if you've got that hole there at the start of your crochet. Just depends on the effect you're going for. But that's the first method, the foundation circle method for starting crochet in the round. So the second method for starting your crochet in the round uses the magic circle, and it's the method that's being used when I started this gingerbread off down at the bottom here. The magic circle can be made in different ways. It's literally just an adjustable sort of circle for you to crochet into. So I'll show you how I do it. So you need to take your yarn and you want your tail end, just lie it across your fingers like so. I always do it on my fingers. You could do it flat if you wanted, but I find it easier to use my fingers. And then this working end, which is the bit that's attached to your ball of yarn, I just take it around my two fingers and across over that tail end like so. And then you insert your hook into that circle you've made, and you want to pull through that working end of yarn, so the bit that's attached to your ball of yarn like so. And then we're just going to secure it by making one chain like so. Okay, so now when we crochet our first round, we're going to do it into this circle. Again, I'm going to be doing treble crochets if you're using UK terms, or double crochets if you're working in US terms. If you were doing an amigurumi or a sort of plushie, you tend to work sort of double crochets in UK terms, or single crochets. But again, it doesn't matter what stitch you do into this circle, it still works the same. So I'm going to do my 16 treble crochets into that circle. There's my first one. And as you do this, you go over that tail of your yarn again. Okay, just like we did when we did the foundation circle. Okay, you want to go over it. So again, I will speed this video up while I do all my stitches. I'm doing 16, just so you don't get bored watching me. And then I'll show you how we close this circle once we've done them. Okay, so now I'm just doing the last stitch like so. Okay, so that's 16 stitches, and then we're just going to take this tail and we're going to pull. Okay, good hard pull, and that just closes it up. And then again, if you want to join, you can do a slip stitch into your first stitch just to close the row off. Sometimes you don't need to do that, depending on what you're making. You might just carry on stitching straight in to the next round. Okay, but that's our magic circle. So these are the two different methods for starting crocheting in the round. You've got your foundation circle method and your magic circle. And there isn't much difference between them when you're doing the same stitches. The biggest difference really is your hole in the middle. With the magic circle, it's much easier to close that hole up, and you can almost make it disappear. Whereas with the foundation circle, it's not so easy to get rid of that hole, so it can stay there. So it does sort of depend on the project you're doing as to which method you wish to use. Sometimes it does just come down to your personal preference as to which one you prefer. If you're doing something like a granny square, then having that little hole in the middle really doesn't make any difference, unless you really don't like it, and then you might prefer the magic circle so you can get rid of that hole a bit more. If you're doing amigurumi, then you do tend to use your magic circle method more, just so you can close that hole up. You won't do quite as many stitches in that first round, because you don't really want holes in your amigurumi where your stuffing can come out. Okay, so then it does make a difference, but a lot of the time it is just personal choice. When it comes to working a second round of stitches, whichever method you used, it doesn't matter. You can then work your stitches just into these V's, which are the tops of your stitches of the previous round, just like you would do when you were stitching in rows. But there are times where patterns might call for you to even stitch between stitches, just to make different effects. But again, that's exactly the same as when you are crocheting in rows. There's no difference except you're going round instead of straight across. You will find that when you are stitching in a round, quite often the number of stitches will increase in each round that you do. It does depend on what you are making as to whether this will be in every round or just some of the rounds. So if you're trying to make a flat shape like a square or a circle, like in the granny squares, then your stitch count will increase every single round that you do. Depending on the shape you're making, there'll be combinations of stitches and chains for different effects and to get different shapes. But if you're stitching amigurumi, you will find that stitches will increase on some of the rows, but then you may get rows where the stitches stay the same for a number of rows, and that gives you more of like a tube shape. And then the stitches will even decrease to form the shapes at the top and to finish your pieces off. But again, this is just a case of seeing what happens when you try different things, or even just follow a pattern. It's where working to a pattern is very good, especially when you're new and you're learning, because that will help you to learn what happens when you do different things. Okay, so there we go. That's our two methods. So that's how to start crocheting in the round. Like I said, it is personal preference as to which of the methods you use. For me, it depends on what I'm trying to achieve with the finished crochet piece, so the look I'm going for. A lot of the time, I do just follow what the pattern tells me to do. But if I'm not happy with it, I will swap to the other method. So yeah, I'll pop the links to the items I've used in this video in the description. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!